not there. Is Shannon there or?
No, Shannon
Doing
is
all of that?
Shannon is not here either. She was called away too. We've
Okay.
got Shannon on board our little family, and so the three of us
You
are
are the
putting it
show.
together. Yeah, we are the show. So tonight, yes, I am the show. In fact, we are now on the air. Hey, everybody. My name is Troy Myers. I'm a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA in Creative Writing at the University of Southern Maine. About 8 or 9 months ago in January, a colleague of mine, Amanda Plow, and I decided to start a Sunday night reading series for alumni of the program. We also have special guests and faculty. We have two special guests tonight, Ted and Annie Deppe, who are joining us live from Ireland, where it is what time there now, Ted?
A little after 1 o'clock
Yep.
now.
After 1 o'clock in the morning. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Only for you, Troy.
Thanks for asking us.
Oh, well, it's only
1 in
5
the morning.
o'clock here. Easy time for me. I always say hi to my mom. Hi, Mom, who watches the next day. And to Amanda's mom, who I haven't met, but who also watches. So hello to you both. So Ted and Annie, so I'll introduce how I met you. There was for many years. How many years was Stone Coast going to Ireland before the pandemic came in and shook it up?
Started in 2006.
Okay.
And so we made it until 2019. Didn't have residencies in 2020 or 21.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that it was kind of the deciding factor for me when I knew nothing about MFAs, but I knew I could go to Ireland if I went to Stone Coast. And so I did go there, and I've always been happy since that I did. And I went to an Irish residency in Dingle in the summer. And then right after I graduated, I came back. I did a 5th residency in Howth. We did the winter residency.
Yeah.
So Ted and Andy coordinated those, and Ted was on faculty at Stone Coast. Now the program's been suspended because of COVID. I don't know what's going on at the university, of course. I'm all the way out in California, but I would love to see it brought back. It was a popular program and added a lot of texture, I think, to the MFA itself. So good luck with that, guys. But in the meantime, you're doing well, kind of retired. And where do you live, Ted and Andy? Because it's a special place, I know.
We're on the coast of Connemara, about halfway up the west coast of Ireland. And we are in a long-term rental. We were in a place right next to a ruined castle that Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen, used to own. So we were in Castle Cottage for 9 years, but that was sold by the family, and we wondered what was going to happen next, and we landed on our feet. We're 15 minutes up the coast in another long-term rental. Views of the sea, we can see Inishbofin Island, Inishturk, Achill Island, Clare Island, and the coast of Mayo. So very nice.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to visit your old place, and I do not think I've ever seen a vista that beautiful in my life.
It was raining, I think, when you came. Could you see any of the islands at all?
Yes, you could. Islands, clouds. I mean, Wordsworth would have lit up, right? I mean, it was just, I lit up, just gorgeous. So I'm so glad you're still there. And Ted and Annie, how did you get to Ireland? You're not Irish by birth.
No. My grandparents were born in Ireland, 2 of them. And so that made me eligible for dual citizenship. And that's my connection.
I married well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why you married.
But we've always loved Ireland. And Ted had an amazing walk. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. We have a minute.
19, I talked my Earlham College into giving me the first low residency program. This was a few years before Warren Wilson became the first low residency MFA program, but I got a English professor and a creative writing professor and a philosophy professor to give me independent studies. And I took a 6-month hike around Ireland and got academic credit for it. So, fell in love with the place. And then in 2000, we just came back for 1 year to rent the southernmost house in all of Ireland on Cape Clare Island. And everything sort of just followed from that. We were offered teaching jobs and just stayed here instead of going back to the States.
Fantastic, Ted. And Andy, we're going to start with you. Here's some poems from you. You just had a book come out, correct?
Yes, I did.
Can you see it or hear the title or know something about it?
It's called Night Collage. This painting is by our daughter.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it just came out in June.
And it's an Irish press? We can get it in the States?
Irish press. It's Arlen House Press.
Okay.
And it's available in the States now through Syracuse University or Amazon. It's available through Book Depository and postage free all over the world.
Right.
And it's available from me.
Good, Annie. I met you and heard you read when I was in Ireland before. You shared very personal work. So I'm looking forward to your poems tonight. So it's all you. I'll step away and take it away. It's your time.
Thanks so much. So thank you, Troy. It's really nice to be here. And thank you. I wish I could see the faces of people out there, but I know you're there. And thank you for showing up tonight. It's good to have you. As we said, we've been living in Ireland since 2000. And this first poem I'm going to write to read is spread over 3 different landscapes. And one of them is Northampton, Massachusetts, where we were living for the 10 years before we moved here. And that's where our children were. And once they were grown, we just needed an adventure. So we've got one landscape that's Northampton. We've got one that's Columbia, Missouri, which was where I had my high school years because my parents were teaching at the University of Missouri there. And then Renville, which is where we live now. The White Strand makes a little guest appearance in the middle of the poem. So different time frames, different landscapes. This is called In Flu Chaos. It had been snowing for hours when the pounding began. Thinking it one of my teenage children finally home on a Friday night, but without a key, I left my book to open the door, and into the kitchen's warmth flew chaos. A young woman shaking in a thin dress, snow-covered hair and no shoes, arms flailing at something I could not see, screaming. And then the sudden silence as she yanked me down to a crouch so he won't see us. What brings such disorder to mind now? On this morning's walk, we found the storm had rearranged the strand. A foot or more of sand was washed away, exposing jagged rock crops we hadn't known were there. On hands and knees, the girl and I watched from the hall window a slow, dark sedan slide by, snow falling in its headlights. Her fingernails biting my arm. The quick shh, he will kill me if he sees us. My husband was oblivious, doing something we called sleeping fast before driving unplowed roads across 2 states to reach his job. When I was a girl, a woman came waving a silver revolver at another back door. Only glass between. My mother, who liked to read mysteries late into the night, let this stranger in and sat chatting with her at the kitchen table while I listened from the next room. I kept trying to picture where the gun was. By the time my sons and daughter got home, the ambulance was gone. On the table, by his bowl and morning cup, a note for my husband. And my mother and her woman with the gat, as it was handed down in family stories, what was she thinking? What was I? I always knew I would do anything to keep my family safe, but where had my good sense flown? Her pupils were dilated, As they lifted the stretcher, all I could do was give her hand a squeeze and tell her it would be all right. Damn it. Even as her body surrendered to the straps, I couldn't help being glad to see her go. But something wild had visited. Something had knocked at the storm door and been let in. And isn't that where poems come from? When something knocks on our storm door and we let them in. This next poem is a coming of age poem. I was, I guess, kind of a high-strung, nervous child. I was also the child of a minister. I grew up in a minister's family. And it was during the 50s and 60s. And I sometimes am just astonished that I got through it all alive and made it out the other side with all those societal expectations. This is called The Wind Around the Gunnels. Back then, I was the sort of girl who was sure someone would die if the phone rang while I climbed the stairs, so I raced. Nights I would lie in bed hiding in my mind from murderers. A minister's family. I learned to smile through everything, but never to talk. By 12, that smile was adrift in red. I almost broke that smile, leaning hard into its scaffolding. This repetition of the smile here, is it too much for you? Well, I had my act down so well until 15, I danced with a man who whispered in my ear, "You're a fake." And all that protection simply tumbled. And where can a person go from there? It took decades before I understood how it's possible to be too nice. I suppose one could say that smile became a boat with ribs broken beneath the skin, or for those who could read it right, the wind sorrowing around the gunwale. But to that girl, it was a refuge carved high into a mountainside, almost inaccessible, a place she imagined she could shelter in. We've been so lucky since coming to Ireland. We have lived almost constantly by the sea ever since arriving here. And as Ted said, we look out over islands. We look over to the mountains on the coast of Mayo. It's absolutely gorgeous, it's stunning. And if it weren't night, I would just pick up the computer. I'd take you right over there, and I'd let you take a glimpse. We've loved living here. It's a land that's very good to its writers. It's a country that loves words and language. And it's cherished. But the hardest thing is the tug and pull of the heart is between living someplace that you love, but having your family on the other side of the ocean. This is a poem called Meditation on the Gift of Feet. Our neighbor waves as he carries his bucket of scraps down to the cove. Twice each day, a cloud of herring gulls heralds his arrival. Tonight, we're enjoying our supper outdoors as insatiable seabirds and sleek black crows rise from the water. Our talk drifts back to the Christmas Eve dinner when a 15-year-old son did not come home, and how, after the rest of the family put out the tree lights, I climbed into his bed to wait. How did we all survive those teenage years? In my mind, only accident or worse could keep a son away that night. As it turned out, and if it turned out he was dead, what then? The one clear thought I remember before he arrived home safe, if unapologetic, was I would put on my shoes and walk my grief till I could come up for air. The Cumberlands, the Blue Ridge, the Smoky Mountains, that litany of Appalachian ranges echoes again as the mountains of Mayo create tonight's horizon. And I recall how years earlier we heard the news about 3 Mile Island at a table in Kentucky. Separated from my parents in New England, I swore I would take off and walk to find them there, 1,000 miles distance, if the crippled nuclear power plant permanently shut down the grid. Now our family is spread across 2 continents. Water is rising. Both the Arctic and the Amazon are going up in flames. The state of lungs in what might be the first weeks of a pandemic. If life as we know it ceases to be, how does a mother when an ocean lies between? That's one of my perennial questions. This next poem takes place on the Renville Peninsula, where we live, and we've lived in, I guess, three different houses while we've been on this peninsula. And the houses merge in the poem with a newspaper story that I read that intrigued me. The Singing House. That autumn in Tully Cross, the months slipping from green to tan, the presence of George Herbert keeping me company beside Derry Herbert's rising hill. There were times when I sat at the table alone, no one else at home, and an indistinct melody line would lift from somewhere within the house, then blossom into multi-part harmonies of humming or vibrating string song. And I wondered whether this drifting gift, sometimes from the side and others from behind my skull, was part star song or brainstorm or messages from beyond or appliance or entirely imagined. My husband never heard it. We didn't live there long. Several years later, a few townlands away, I read about an operation on a young man with a tumor in his skull who loves music, whose life is music, and how his doctor mapped his brain through MRI, then prodded to try and find where his gift dwells. The doctor's goal, to spare that sacred place within. Midway through the operation, still awake, tethered to machines, brain exposed, he was handed his saxophone, golden and glowing, and told to blow. It's as though our souls work from the inside out to form a chord of rhythms and vibrations to manifest a place of harmony. I'd like to think that surgeon went home and heard a night chorus from his refrigerator or wherever such melodies come from. Music rising within 4 walls as outside the wind backs in from the west. And one last poem, and have it right here. This is called "And When the Red Wine of Minervois." And when the red wine of Minervois turned out to be white, my guard let down, the words slipped out, I need to bring the wash in from the line. How many years has it been? I must have been all of 7 when I realized only my mother, brought up in Bryn Mawr, ever spoke of washcloths. Soon I could say wash with the best of them. Wash the dishes, do the wash. My father reminding me always to wash between my legs. The washcloth strategically floating over him during our shared baths. There's so many things I've never gotten to tell you, Mother. And my shame over your accent was undeniably the least. I will bring in the wash from the line tonight. I will make up my marriage bed. I will rejoice in the sun calves frolicking the cliff road above the sea. I will try and find the right words to say what has never been said. Thank you.
Annie, that was profound.
Thanks, Troy.
You read so well, and those poems were absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
And heart-wrenching. Oh, I'm ordering your book. Got the computer.
Thank you. Thank you. Night collage.
I didn't mention that normally Amanda Plough, who produces this show, is away, and Shannon Ratliff has joined us, and she's away, so I'm doing it all tonight, and I'm not that good on the tech side. But I am sharing the comments as best I can that are coming out from the Facebook feed. I think if you log in, Facebook users, it will have your name up there, but it's okay. I hope Annie's seeing and feeling all the love.
I'll get to read Ted's. Ted's gotten to read mine.
Well, it's recorded, so you can come back and see them.
Thank you.
Of course, but I sincerely am very impressed, Annie, and I'm so glad that you came and read for us tonight. Such beautiful poems. In the first poem about the 2 women, what was the story? What happened to the first one with the snow in her hair, who was crouching?
Oh, yes, yeah. Last I saw her, she was put in the back of an ambulance and taken off. It was a wonderful area. They call it the 5 college area of Western Massachusetts because it's got Smith and Mount Holyoke and Amherst and UMass and Hampshire College. And it's a mecca for people, but it's also a mecca for young people and a lot of social problems that I think are, it's just, this would have been, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that this all would have been going on. And there was already just huge drug abuse. And she was just out of her mind in a tiny little summer dress in the snow.
Wow.
Barefoot.
It is a resonant image that you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And in your last poem, wow. You walked that confessional line so elegantly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to more of your poetry, Annie.
Thank you.
And we'll bring you back. I don't know if we've ever had this many comments. I don't normally do this part of the show, but gosh, there's a lot of people happy to see you who miss you and Ted and miss Ireland.
Oh, it feels like coming home. I got to tell you, we just so much loved having, being able to share Ireland with students. And it was just, it's just one of the best jobs ever. And I miss the Stone Coast, and I miss the Stone Coast students, and I miss the Stone Coast and Ireland students in particular. Yeah.
Well, hey, when the borders open up, I know universities kind of let it go, but I could see an alumni petition getting organized for this show. Because I want other students to appreciate what I...
Well, we've done our own independent conferences.
You have?
Well, okay. So they may be back in order. We'll see.
Okay, so that's another way to come study with you.
I think we're probably in the same situation the university's in, that we're just have to wait a while. Nobody knows what's going to happen with COVID and all.
I know the Delta variant, the Mu variant. It's so distressing. I'm throwing up some more of these wonderful comments. Debbie changed my life with my writing. We don't know who these people
Stone
are.
Coast Abu, yes.
You know who that is?
Yeah, I don't know who it is, but I know where they got it from.
What's the story with Abu?
Down in Dingle. What's her name? Starts with a C. Camilla. We had that written up above the stage where everybody would do the readings in the bookshop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got to read in that bookshop. What a great experience
Yeah.
that was. Oh, what a time. Well, Annie has a partner.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to slide out and
He's a guy named Ted. We're going to go ahead and bring on Ted, Deppie. Now, Ted, you and Annie coordinated Stone Coast Island. You were actually faculty at Stone Coast as well.
Right.
Yeah, that's correct. And you were my first mentor, which is how this sort of happened. We got the idea to pair faculty, current or past, because there's so much turnover, with students who they worked with, so that the student could talk about the experience and reminisce a little bit. The Yay Teds are coming up right now here. Ted, I want to tell a story that I think I told you once, which is that I don't know famous poet types, but I ended up at a little backyard party where Stephen Dunn was, and you studied who's the Pulitzer Prize winning American poet, and was at that time, and probably hopefully still is, married to what's his wife's name? Yeah. Yes, and she was on Stone Coast faculty, so I had the courage to approach her, and I got to talk with Stephen a little bit since I was in Stone Coast. And he said, because he was one of your faculty when you were doing your MFA, and he said, Ted was the moral center of that class.
I met him I didn't have him as a mentor, but I was at Vermont Studio Center at the same time that he was there, and he was running a workshop that I attended. So if I got to be the moral center of the workshop, that's a surprise to me. But
isn't it kind of remarkable that he remembered you after not spending a lot of time, just that one workshop? He remembered you.
We spent 2 weeks there, was it? Annie took care of 3 teenage kids at home, and the odd person sort of storming the house while I got to go off and do Vermont Studio Center and hang out with Stephen Dunn. So thank you, Annie.
He remembers you. Barbara did too. They're such wonderful people.
They came to Dingle. Barbara and Stephen both taught at one of the Stone Coast and Ireland residencies.
I just love that. Who else has a Pulitzer Prize poet say he was the moral center of the workshop? You earned it, Ted, because your character is profound and runs very deep.
Thank you.
It was an honor to work with you. We'll talk about that more after you read. But are you still swimming every day in the Irish Sea?
I still swim every day. And when Troy came to Howth, he was made sure that he went swimming in the Irish Sea to break the record of the most Stone Coast and Ireland students who had swum in January in the Irish Sea.
I knew there was
I swim here in the North Atlantic. Irish Sea is on the other side. But
okay, I'm sorry. Some ancillary, record broken. But it was, I think the water was 45. It was like 40 degrees. I can't remember, but as soon as you get in and you feel your calves stream like the beginning of death, you're going to die. And yet it is kind of spiritual coming that close to hypothermia. And being in the ocean, and I'm proud of you for doing it, Ted. And
you get acclimatized, and so it isn't. The first time that I went in, Annie told me that I had to go into the water after my father's death. Yes. I taught at Stone Coast, and then I taught at in a conference in Sligo, and then I taught down in Dingle, and there was one residency after the next, and we finally got back to Renville, and she said, "Into the water you go." And I had no idea uh, how cold it was going to be, and we had tea together in the shower afterwards. But
Oh,
when you do it every day, you get used to it, and then it just becomes this endorphin rush that's very wonderful.
wow, fantastic. I'm so glad you're still doing it. And it was a way for you to process grief. And
It was a chance to sort of go down and greet my parents, and then I would go down for quite a long time. I would go swim and then come back and write. And I wrote a 56-page poem or something like that that just came out of the writings after the swims.
that's fantastic. Well, Ted, what are you going to share tonight? You have how many books of poems? 5? I own 3.
7 books at this point.
7 books. What's your latest book that you have?
Latest one is Riverlight. And it's hiding here someplace. No, it isn't. I'll get to it.
Shall I find it?
Well, it is your time now. If you
Okay.
like, go ahead. We'd love to hear your work, and we're all ears.
It's so great getting to read with you, and your reading in Dingle was just really memorable. And then Troy got to do a featured reading when he came back as an alum to Hoth, and so that was Christina Mock and Anya Mali and Troy Myers gave a terrific reading. I've been, this is the most recent book, was Riverlight, again with a painting by our daughter. We're in the process right now of unpacking, and that's one of those sort of strange existential times when you begin to confront all of the stuff that you're carrying around. And one of the things that I found that I didn't know that I still had was a drawing that a patient, a 10-year-old patient of mine in a children's unit for abused kids drew one night for me. And I wanted to start with a poem that comes from that drawing. It's called Red Pigeons. Josh wakes each morning between 2 and 3, won't stop crying as the rest of the unit tries to sleep. I'd sedate him, but the doctor wants this 10-year-old evaluated without meds. All night he draws magic marker variations of his one theme. I call him the master of red pigeons. Illuminated birds circle burning tenements in each picture. In the one he gave me, the streets an orange line slashing towards homes it never reaches. Row houses rise in multicolored flames, each blaze tilted a different angle. Everything wave and roll and ripple of fire, while smoke spirals up in little cyclones. Just out of reach of the sparks, brilliant birds ride the updrafts, outstretched wings reflecting fire. For a moment, he makes a song of it. Until I look up, until he sees I've looked up, he sings a few lines about a boy at a burning window watching red pigeons. It's almost as if we're playing. It's almost as if the wooden fire escape he's added to the house isn't already burning. That's a poem I haven't read for a long time and had forgotten about until I found the drawing, and just thought I would start out with it. One more poem that deals with moving, and this one, it's not where I marked the one. Okay, there it is. This comes after the 6-month walk around Ireland, and returning to Earlham College, I found everything that was waiting for me made me homesick for the little rucksack that poor things seemed so simple. It's called On the Natural History of Possessions. Out-of-date almanacs, boxes we never unpacked from last move, reminders to see a dentist who died 5 years ago. Unpacking, we vow again to simplify, but know how complicated a task that is. 3 decades since I carried almost everything I owned outside, reassembling my room just as it had been upstairs. Little reading table and lamp next to the bed, cinder block and board bookcases defining imagined walls, and an extension cord powering an RCA phonograph for one last play of my records. For a half year, I'd walked around Ireland with a small rucksack, then returned to the States to find everything I thought I loved oppressed me. Oh, Gandhi, Thoreau, Tolstoy, Scott and Helen Nearing, Francis of Assisi. How many books repeating less is more does one man need? By day's end, what I owned fit in my bike basket. Still, no one ever said the simple life was easy. The woman who bought my favorite books had such good taste. I fell in love, and when we were married, most of what I thought I'd let go waltzed back into my life. Soon, attic and garage and basement and barn overflowed with everything we'd loved or fancied for an afternoon. How little we need, and how much seems to need us. We stacked boxes to the ceiling of the mudroom, hoping to open them next spring. Trying to mix tones in a poem is one good recipe for disaster, but when it works, I think it sometimes can have really good effects. That's what I was hoping for in this next poem. It's called Shouting at the Windows of the Night. November 2nd, 1965. My birthday of the electric guitar. It might for me have been nothing more than the 4 of us practicing in the basement, Louie Louie, because our governor tried to ban the song statewide, thereby proclaiming it the anthem any Indiana band must learn first. Johnny claimed he knew the real version. Lyrics so lewd the Kingsmen had to slur them. So we mastered the art of mumbling words meaningfully. Then someone said we'd never beat the government in making the obscene unclear. So in that not quite soundproof cellar, until Father came down to say, boys, it's a school night. We shouted the wrong words to Louie Louie as clearly as we could. I didn't hear the news until later, but the same day I turned 15, a Quaker from Baltimore drove through rush hour red to the Pentagon. Witnesses disagreed whether Norman Morrison doused himself in kerosene before or after he let his infant daughter go. But she was there as her father became a 12-foot pillar of fire, roaring at the window of the defense secretary. No one, not the bystanders, not the police who rushed to his side, not Secretary McNamara himself, no one could make out his last words. 44 birthdays ago. But sometimes Norman Morrison still draws near as I celebrate. He who had done everything he knew how to do, protested, prayed, refused war taxes, now shares with me the 2nd of November, the Day of the Dead. Something in me thinks I understand giving one's life for others. But what if he meant to take his daughter with him? What if he thought an American child must burn so we would see what napalm does? The flames rose, and at some point this father let his father go. At some point this father let his daughter go. Perhaps he held her until his arm muscles contracted in a jolt of flame. Or maybe an angel commanded, release her. Though I hope he'd already put her down before lighting the match, knowing this death was his alone. Witnesses could tell us nothing. They only agreed they couldn't understand a single word he shouted at the windows of the night. I'm about halfway through a new collection of poems, but the last 2 years have mostly been spent trying to finish a novel, and I've finally just completed it. I've sent it off to one publisher who expressed at least willingness to read it. It's a long shot, so we'll not worry about that yet. But it's about a young artist, Anton Davidson, who all but disappears from his family after the death of his younger sister. For several years, he lives in Ireland with the cellist Teelan O'Flaherty. It was interesting as I was going through boxes and going through the strata of all of these things, trying to put this reading together, I realized that Teelan's character was formed very early for me in 6 poems in my very first book with Alice James, Children of the Air. And there's 6 poems about a manic depressive woman named Sarah who quits her job, then takes a different road home, winding slowly above the river and the blue, weightless hills. For the first time in months, she sings a whole symphony to herself, this time Beethoven's 7th, both hands off the wheel long enough to make drums thunder on the dashboard. Finally, she stops the car, wades out singing into tall fields. The object has always been to sustain song as long as possible. So that's Teelan for me. Resisted lithium, just as Sarah did, for the first half of the novel, and then does her best to reconcile herself to it. Anton is invited to go back to the States. He's an artist, and he's goes back to give some art lectures. And while he's there, the pandemic hits, and he has to shelter in place at his sister's, and he begins to have to come to terms with the family that he disappeared from 20 years ago. He begins interviewing members of his family by Zoom for a book that he decides that he's going to write about meeting Teelan and about the installation that was the means in which he disappears from his family. And while he's doing these interviews, he can't really get his nerve to start writing the book itself. And then he reads an Irish Times article online. He's just relearned to use computers. He doesn't have one himself. And John Banville tells readers, do not start writing a novel during the pandemic. You've got all of this time. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can write a book right now. make bread, that noble art, do something useful, but leave novel writing to the professionals. And Anton, being a contrarian, takes that moment to begin writing. I'll give you 3 minutes. This is the first time I've ever read anything from this novel, and it's one of the interviews that he does with his father, Gregory Davidson, who is a novelist and a professor at Dartmouth College. Single parent, very judgmental, and Anton is having to try and begin talking with him for the first time in 20 years on Zoom. So this is picking up in the middle of the third interview. Anton, my installation began with laughter, as you once said, good stories often do. Gregory, I remember saying that, though I think I maintain that stories are often born from inappropriate laughter. Anton, exactly. Inappropriate laughter. I wonder if you could talk a little about the photograph you found in Life magazine, the one with the umbrella. Gregory, how is that supposed to connect with your installation? Anton, you said stories often come from stories. Tell yours. Gregory, well, I was writing a short story that was partly based on my mother, who was a wartime bride. And I was at Dartmouth's library, scrolling through microfiche copies of Life magazine, looking for images from the period, when suddenly one appeared that made me laugh. In the photo of the week, a man strode down a street in Amsterdam. He was carrying an umbrella and wearing socks, shoes, and a woolen hat, but otherwise he was naked. It was like one of those dreams in which you find yourself going out in public without clothes. And the photographer seemed to have captured the moment just before the man with the umbrella realized what he had done. Then I read the caption, which informed Life's readers that this man who was protesting the Nazis' clothing rations ended up in Bergen-Belsen. As soon as I felt the tension between what seemed like a hilarious image and the story behind it, I knew that's what I really needed to write about. I used to tell my students, pay attention when something makes you laugh at the wrong time. It's probably something you need to explore. So tell me why this has anything to do with your installation. What made you put your family through that crap? Anton, in the first room of the installation, I framed a page of my dream journal that begins to answer that. It starts, woke with a hoot from a dream in which there were lights in every window of the house. Gregory, I've carried that dream of yours around for 20 years because it mentioned me specifically, letting me know that from its very beginning, your installation was a monstrous joke. If I recall correctly, you framed a second bit of writing that imagined holding your goodbye party in my house, but you said you could never do it, that it would be unforgivable. And yet you went through with it. Whether or not it was or is unforgivable, you actually brought all that pain and worry onto your family and then didn't stay around to clean up the mess. I mean, fuck you. Why in the world would you create such a laceration? Anton, Colette died, and you blamed me. You were off searching for Weldon keys while Colette was ill. And then you blamed me. So I'll stop there and turn it over and get to hear what Troy has been up to recently.
Well, first, Ted, thank you for sharing. That was some very fine prose from that novel. What was
Thank
it? Such a laceration. Yeah. And thank you for helping us sustain the song as long as possible, that line from the poem. Beautiful work, Ted. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I did say I'd read a little bit, and so I'll do that, and then I'll bring us all back and we can talk a little bit. Couple of things before I start memories of working with Ted. I'd never had a creative writing class. I'd never, went to the MFA, honestly, just to get a raise at work. A friend of mine who was a creative writer and a published poet, Jeff Knorr. And Ted was my first mentor. So I didn't know what I was in for. And I remember he called me to give me my first reading list of contemporary poets, where I'm so weak in. Still am, really. And I was standing outside of the Moby Dick Chapel there in New Bedford. In fact, this is they call themselves New Seamen's Bethel. And they still do some service work there for sailors. So that stuck with me. Also, when I met you before I went to Ireland at the very beginning, I said, how to become a great poet? And you said, read this book. so
I asked 10, 15, 20 different poets, read John Keats' fabulous biography, teach you in 2 years how to become a poet. Troy was one of the only people that took me up on that, because it's such a fat book. But Troy read it, bless you, and look what's happened.
It was a very helpful book, and I have been a Keats fan since high school, but I've stayed close to him lately. And I'm putting up some final comments that came up for your reading, Ted. These are maybe folks signing off before I go. That's okay. I'm pretty nervous anyway. But I'll go ahead and kick it off so we can wrap up somewhat on time. We may go a little over. Amanda's always so careful with that, but I'm home alone. So, and we'll talk. And I want you to know, Ted, I'm reading To You and Annie specifically. I want you to hear what I've been up to. These are all new poems from the spring and summer. And I hope you like them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, I'm Troy Myers, if you're just joining. And I've had a wonderful conversation tonight with Ted and Annie Deppe, who have joined us live from Ireland. It is 1:53 in the morning there, reading some of their poems and fiction. Thank you for the kind comments. Someone saying, go Troy, we're still here. Thank you, I really appreciate it. I may not get to post my own comments while I'm talking, but I'll read a few poems. Ted was my first mentor, and the idea with the Sunday Night Reading Series, which is mostly alumni from Stone Coast, was to pair a faculty member, current or past, because those people rotate around, with a student. And so our first one a few weeks ago was with Rick Bass, with Christina Paracchio. Had a fantastic time hearing Rick read and Christina read. So I asked Ted to come on and said, I'd like to read with you because, you were kind of my first teacher of poetry. And I'm grateful. So I have 4 poems. These are all new. Pretty new. This first one came almost at once. It's one of those great moments in life that I've heard other writers talk about. I remember, poets and other creative artists saying you have to kind of keep the channels open. Try to write as often as you can, or keep the channels open. And I've written very little since Stone Coast. In fact, I didn't really start writing again until we started doing this little broadcast. And I thought, well, I better have some poems. So this poem at May 20th, 4 a.m. I came out and wrote this. It's called Pomegranate. Of course, I edited a bit later, but I'm proud of it, Ted. I hope you like it. I think I really hit my stride in this poem. So, Pomegranate. Before the roses and the holly hedge are limned in neutral light an hour before dawn, a quiet, measured chirp begins outside my study window. Its yearning notes come slow, and then silence in the lifting dark. Only the tapping of my clock and the water murmur of Mozart's clarinets and oboe. In a moment, the call returns with its inquisitory cadence, each tweet now lengthened to a whistle that falls across the unseen lawn. A quarter hour passes and another, built of alternated rests and the solitary surge adagio. I hear no answer in the scattered blackness. But when the opaque air between the oaks flits to pale, pale blue, in a minute, two, 1,000 throats between the river and my yard unspool their unorchestrated flames. Melodic, chaotic, each a testament to the renewal of the living world. I wake late and do not experience many dawns, but I left our bed and Julie's quiet breath to sit alone and burn with tonight's relentless, pulsing fears. This day's beauty birth will not stall the adenocarcinomas that cluster in my mother's colon, nor sketch what conscious light might rise in hope beyond the annihilation of the grave or the howling crematory fire. As I write to better hear, I slide the window open and inhale the brilliant air, its cold perfection settling in my lungs. As across the coloring lawn appear broad white rose blossoms, the green-lit myrtle, the sudden flush of the pomegranate bush at dawn. I want you to know my mom's okay. I caught her cancer early, she had immunotherapy, and her chances are really good. Doesn't mean I'm any less pissed off. I struggle with the suffering in the biological world. It is my leaning. I lean towards theism off and on, and it's difficult to reconcile suffering with any kind of loving higher power or God. So I wrote this poem, speaking of higher powers or God. It's called Blackberry. I did read it last time. I try not to read poems twice, but I want to share it tonight with Ted and Annie. The end of this just came out, so maybe this is something. Below the staccato fire of the woodpeckers, at the edge of our garden kept green, lies a small occult wilderness. Ragged ground heaped with misshapen juniper, live oak, and low liquid ambers. Thin laurels bend across harried grass and gray disordered brush. One could cut a hollow in the center of such a slender wood and rest invisible. 6 yards from the glowing sidewalk, where on warm afternoons the mailman wanders in his dream of names. Or where, after humid showers, fervent dogs sniff along the aromatic edges of the lawn. I would make myself this place, but for the razored blackberry, whose stiff vines snake like lightning through every shaded wall, whose caustic arms curl like wraiths, invisible when I push leaves aside until dark nails burn in my side, in my palms. This poem is directly about the problem of suffering. And it's pretty new. These are all pretty new. This one is pretty new. It's called Bodega Bay. My fiance's parents rent a house for a week on Bodega Bay each summer, or somewhere along the coast, and we go to escape the heat and spend time with Julie's family. So, as Julie and I spoon under insufficient covers, I count 11 seconds between peals of the harbor entrance buoy. Julie's shoulders twitch as she relaxes into sleep. My body's heat, the atmosphere that holds her. Behind me, through our open window, drifts familiar, soothing vapor. I recall 40 years before in Southern California, the drying grace of sun and ocean salt on broken, acneed skin. My beach towel molding hot sand below my arms and torso. The thick colada scent of lotion on my almost lover. Her smooth fingers sliding aloe on my shoulders. Yet tonight, by this wilder northern shore, the caress of sleep eludes me. For though I have held no greater love in my arms, against my back forever rings the rhythm of the monstrous sea. As below its fog-blind surface, sly seals arch and jet between churning, rock-strewn slopes. Hunting, hunting in the black kelp dark. I have just one more poem that I almost didn't read, and it's truly new. My friend Brady, who looks at my poems, got lost in it, so I apologize in advance, but I want to share it, especially after some of the personal content in Annie and Ted's reading. I had very severe depressions in my 20s and really bad anxiety. Suicidal ideation in my mid-20s for off and on during school breaks for 2 or 3 years. And I've long since moved and healed past anything close to that. Recovery works. But my first therapist is really helping me. I saw him for a few months while I was going through these terrible depressions. I had to stop seeing him because he got sexually involved with a client. So I started seeing another therapist who walked me through some of my worst depressions, and after 4 years, got sexually involved with my wife. And they got married. They may be happy as can be, but the damage to me was profound. I blame myself for that. I still fight with it 1 or 2 years. So now's a chance to do a little CNF. Well, it's not fiction, right? To do a little memoir writing. So there's a mention of a current therapist who I have seen. I don't really need to go that much anymore, but she doesn't want the COVID shot, and that for me is kind of uncomfortable. So I'm going to end my relationship with her, and that brought up my memories of my 20s. So this poem, without too much more talking, is called Conflagration. The twilight sky glows orange above the Sacramento Valley as the Sierras sear again with cyclone fires. The air in our yard is white with soot, and when I drag the bucket that holds unused shower water out to our drought-brown hydrangeas, each breath I take is filled with dirt. Julie is gone for errands, and my heart crushes like wax inside a clenching fist. My female therapist of 10 years will not take the COVID vax. I'm okay with it, she says. And so the obscene memories cut like hard-blown sparks. Robert, bastard, the fiend of all my splintered hours. My therapist during my first marriage, who walked me back over more than 4 years. Urges and urges, death by hanging, exacting shower visions of hot blood bursting down the tiles. Glaring July afternoons in bed, staring at the ceiling pressed beneath one pernicious whisper release. Robert, who then chose my young wife's heavy breast and the white comfort of her girl-thin arms over my credulous flickering heart, over my tentative life, fragile as ash, or the yellow cedar boughs severed in last year's storms. I don't know if that's even a good poem. I don't know, but damn, it felt good to write it. So let me bring back my mentors, Ted and Annie. How are you?
Wow. I'm so glad to get to hear those poems. The garden imagery that feels like it's classic Troy Myers. I want to see your garden sometime. I feel like Robert Frost was always behind some of your work, but Stanley Kunitz, I always think of with all of the garden things and the way that the garden was able to suddenly spark and have your mother come in with the cancer worked very well for me. Being able to go with conflagration and go where you really needed to.
Thank you.
Confront this. It's one of the acts of betrayal that deserves a novel.
Yes.
To be able to unpack all of that of somebody taking advantage of you and going off with your wife.
Yeah.
Just amazing to be able to confront that. Thank you for sharing.
We're so glad you're here, Troy.
I always knew I wanted to live, Annie.
Yeah.
And Ellen Bass actually had done some writing back then that was very helpful for me with those feelings. But now she's a really recognized poet. But yeah, I don't have those feelings anymore. I've worked the process, and I really should write about it because there is a way out. Still some anxieties and things, but nothing like I had then. But Ted, Keats read Shakespeare all the time. He thought that's what I need. And of course, that's where I read it. Everybody get this book if you want to write poems. And I dug Keats for a very long time. But Keats that's where I keep landing. And I know in some of my poems when I first showed up, I kind of ended with a bang, right? Like I had a little epigram at the end, which Keats pulls off in Grecian Urn, but that comes after, Grecian Urn, right? And then what Keats says is so relevant. So I'm kind of proud that I thought, at least those first 3 poems, I didn't hear a bang. Like I thought I ended a little more better. And that's something you taught me to work on. So thank you, Ted.
Well, it's always an ongoing exchange. I learn a lot from my students, and just you and Brady were talking about novels that really were affecting you, and it was John Williams' Stoner. I'm halfway through that now, thanks to your comment. And
yes,
so
isn't it good?
Students, as part of an ongoing education for faculty or for older writers, you're always learning things.
I'm so glad. Tonight has been so wonderful for me and so personal. I'm so proud. Thank you for the kind comments from the readers that popped up in the chat. One person whose name is in there said, please write about it. And so many of us need to know that way out. Damn it, I will take that as a challenge. I don't know where I'll do it. I'll get a blog. I don't know what the hell I'll do. But there really are so many ways to heal. And God, thank you for everyone.
Before we go, I need to remember Troy.
Yes, please. Remember
Yeah.
what?
In Hoth.
Yes.
Kate Newman and Joan Newman gave a reading.
Yes, they did.
They brought wine and they brought Prosecco
They
at
did.
the end of the reading. Everybody coming here, I would like to, buy the next round for you.
I wish.
But here are 2 poets that gave everybody a glass of wine, and Troy went out in the hall and popped the Prosecco, and that brought the bartender from downstairs who was counting on selling
Of the yacht
wine
club.
to everybody at this reading. And we were in big trouble. Troy gallantly paid the cork fee, as I remember, and then befriended the barman, Frank, and was singing The Fields of Athen Rye by the end of the evening with Frank, his new best friend.
Well,
Kate Newman and Paula Meehan, the poet laureate of Ireland. And, it was.
So I have to tell that story truthfully, Ted, and then we have to go. We can do this again and just tell Iron's stories, but I will wrap up and say that I didn't know I was the one who brought him up, but he came up. He was upset. We were using the little water glasses, and Kate and Joan Newman bring wine. You're going to drink it wherever you are. really if anyone brings wine. We were in the yacht club on the second floor, and so their bar was open, and he did get upset. And I went down to pay the tab. Kate Newman is the daughter, correct? Yeah. Wonderful woman. Kate came down there and said she would not let me do it. I said, no, please. It is a point of honor. I backed off. She wasn't kidding. So she paid the cork fee for the bottles. But then I was sitting with Kate and Jonah all at the table, and I wanted to remember the words "The Fields of Athenry," which I knew from the punk version of Dropkick Murphys, and we started singing it. Kate and Joan, beautiful voices, and Frank joined in.
Yeah.
I'd never written about that. I gave a political speech with that in it once.
Really?
Ridiculous, but it'd make a nice poem, wouldn't it?
That was a highlight of the residency for me.
Thank you too.
Everyone, I did my best to sing along, but you carried the song.
Well, it really did heal whatever was hurt there.
Yeah.
And he had a fantastic tenor voice, as I recall, the bartender. Yes. And that is sort of the unofficial national anthem of Scotland. If you haven't heard Fields of Athenry, check it out. And anyway, we'll tell more stories next time I had you. You guys, it was my favorite night probably so far. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. You wrote so much love coming to the screen, so much sincerity and authenticity. Thank you all who joined us. We will have Ted and Annie back in the future.
Thank you.
We'll have our eyes open for Stone Coast Ireland rebooting, or come to Ireland with Ted and Annie and learn poetry, right? There could be something like that out there that we wouldn't have to be students to go to. So thank you both. Thank you all for a wonderful evening. Everyone, stay safe. Love you. Good night.